Dominic Mad Dog Mcglinchey, the making of a terrifying enigma. On a quiet country road outside Dundalk, in the early hours of a March morning in 1994, a car slows to a halt. Inside sits a man once feared across Ireland and Britain alike. Moments later, gunfire shatters the stillness. When it is over, Dominic McGlinchey, known to allies and enemies alike as Mad Dog, lies dead, shot not by the British Army, nor by the police, but by his own organization. It is a brutal end to a brutal life. But to understand how Dominic McGlinchey rose to become one of the most dangerous men of the Troubles, and why even his comrades came to see him as uncontrollable, we must return to where his story began. Dominic McGlinchey was born in 1954 in Bellaghy, County Derry, a rural village that would later become synonymous with poetry and reflection through the work of Seamus Heaney. But McGlinchey's Bellaghy was very different. This was Northern Ireland in the grip of sectarian tension, a society rigidly divided by religion, politics, and identity. Catholic communities like Bellaghy often felt marginalized, watched, and hemmed in by a state they did not recognize as legitimate. For young Dominic, anger came early. Friends later recalled a boy who was volatile, aggressive, and deeply confrontational, someone who reacted instinctively to perceived slights, real or imagined. Violence was not something he learned gradually. It was something he seemed to understand intuitively. By his late teens, Northern Ireland had descended into open conflict. The Troubles had begun, and for Dominic McGlinchey, the chaos of the era would become an opportunity. Like many young Catholic men in the early 1970s, McGlinchey was drawn toward republicanism, not through ideology alone, but through emotion. Anger at British soldiers on the streets, fury at internment without trial, rage at raids, arrests, and the deaths of civilians. But McGlinchey was different. Where others debated politics, he sought action. He gravitated toward the Irish National Liberation Army, the INLA, a splinter group formed in 1974 after a bitter ideological break from the official IRA. The INLA was smaller, more chaotic, and far more ruthless. It suited him perfectly. From the outset, McGlinchey made his mark not as a strategist or thinker, but as an enforcer. He was fearless, or appeared to be, reckless, often uncontrollable. Fellow Republicans spoke of a man who relished violence not merely as a means to an end, but as an end in itself. He drank heavily, he took drugs, he carried weapons constantly, and he killed. McGlinchey was implicated in multiple shootings, bombings, and punishment attacks. Some were directed at British forces, others were not. Civilians, informers, even fellow Republicans fell victim to his temper. It was during this period that the nickname emerged, Mad Dog. At first, it was spoken half-jokingly. Soon, it was not a joke at all. By the late 1970s, McGlinchey had become too well known in Northern Ireland. The police were hunting him relentlessly, so he crossed the Irish Sea to England. There, he would carry out one of the most shocking acts of the entire Troubles. In 1979, McGlinchey planted a bomb near a British Army barracks in the Drop and Well pub near Ballykelly, County Derry, a popular off-duty venue frequented by soldiers and civilians alike. The explosion tore through the building. 17 people were killed. Many more were injured. It was one of the deadliest attacks of the conflict. For McGlinchey, there was no remorse, no hesitation. The attack cemented his reputation, not just as a militant, but as a mass killer, and it ensured that his name would be known far beyond Bellaghy. McGlinchey was eventually captured and sentenced to life imprisonment. For many paramilitaries, prison became a place of political education, a university of revolution. For Dominic McGlinchey, it became something else entirely. Inside the Maze prison, his volatility intensified. He clashed repeatedly with prison officers and with fellow inmates. He took drugs. He smuggled alcohol. He defied authority at every turn. Even among hardened paramilitaries, McGlinchey stood out as unstable. But instability did not diminish his influence. If anything, it enhanced it. To younger INLA prisoners, he was a legend. A man who had taken the fight directly to the British state without apology or restraint. And when he was released in 1983 after serving just over 4 years, he emerged to find the INLA fractured, weakened, and leaderless. McGlinchey saw his moment. By the mid-1980s, Dominic McGlinchey had become the chief of staff of the INLA, its most powerful figure. It was an astonishing rise for a man with no patience for politics. Under his leadership, the INLA became more violent, but also more erratic. Operations were often poorly planned. Civilian casualties mounted. Internal discipline collapsed. McGlinchey ruled through fear. He ordered the killing of suspected informers on flimsy evidence. He authorized punishment shootings that left men crippled for life. He threatened journalists, priests, and community leaders alike. Even within Republican circles, he was increasingly viewed as dangerous. Not just to the British state, but to everyone. By the late 1980s, McGlinchey was spiraling downwards at a fast pace. Heavy cocaine use intensified his already volatile personality. He became paranoid, convinced that his enemies were everywhere. He believed the police were closing in. He believed his own comrades were plotting against him. Mind you, sometimes they were. INLA units began to refuse his orders. Senior figures attempted to sideline him. McGlinchey responded the only way he knew how, with violence. Internal feuds erupted. Former allies were shot dead. The organization began eating itself alive. For a movement already struggling for relevance, McGlinchey's leadership was catastrophic, and yet removing him would prove extraordinarily difficult. By 1993, the decision had been made. Dominic McGlinchey had become a liability too great to tolerate, not because he had turned against the cause, but because he had become uncontrollable. He was using drugs openly. He was issuing reckless threats. He was drawing police attention wherever he went. And worst of all, he was unpredictable. For paramilitary organizations, unpredictability is fatal. In March 1994, McGlinchey was lured to a meeting in County Louth, in the Republic of Ireland. He believed it was routine. It was not. The ambush was swift and merciless. McGlinchey was shot 14 times at close range, with pump-action shotguns. There were no final words, no dramatic confrontation. The severity of his execution suggests that this was personal and tough as he was. He obviously wasn't the only one among his comrades who was dangerous. The man who had inspired terror for 2 decades was dead within seconds. The INLA later confirmed responsibility. In a chilling understatement, they described his execution as a disciplinary matter. Today, Dominic Mad Dog Mcglinchey occupies an uneasy place in the history of the Troubles. He is remembered not as a political figure, nor as a strategist, but as an embodiment of violence unrestrained by ideology. To some, he was a product of his time, a child of conflict shaped by injustice and rage. To others, he was something far darker, a man who found meaning only in destruction. What is certain is this: Dominic McGlinchey did not advance peace. He did not bring unity. And in the end, he did not even survive his own cause. His story is a warning of what happens when anger eclipses purpose and when violence becomes an identity rather than a tool. In the end, Mad Dog was not brought down by the British state he hated, but by the movement he helped destroy.